Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Book Club of California's program this evening. Thank you for joining us here at Pasadena Heritage's beautiful and historic Blinn House. We love having our programs here, and I'd like to do a shout out for this venue, the Blinn House, and for Pasadena Heritage. My name is Kevin Kosick, and I'm the Executive Director for the Book Club of California, and it's my pleasure to welcome you and kind of get this program started this evening. For those of you that might be new to the Book Club of California, we are a nonprofit member and donor-supported organization that is dedicated to preserving and promoting the history of the book and the book arts. Oftentimes we do that with focus on the history and the literature of California and the West. The Book Club publishes limited edition, finely made books, a quarterly newsletter, and keepsakes for our members. We also hold a series of programs and exhibitions in San Francisco and here in Southern California on topics including, gotta take out my list, fine printing, design, typography, bookbinding, collecting, California history, the book arts, and much, much more. Now, if you're not a member of the book club, or if your membership has lapsed and you're interested in what we do, please consider joining our century-long tradition. Membership dues are modest, but the benefits are many, and we simply can't do the work of the book club without the support of our members. So I invite you to check us out online at bccbooks.org to join the book club, to donate to the book club, or just to find out more about us. And now for tonight's program. The program is titled Voices of Contemporary Women Writers in Southern California. And it's something different for us. It's a panel discussion moderated by writer and book club board member Daria E. Topousis. Tonight, these writers will talk about how they ground their work in Los Angeles, what has helped them persevere in a highly competitive space, and how the literary community has changed in the last decade and how it is continuing to change. Now, if you have questions for our speakers, we will have time towards the end. It will be a panel discussion that Daria will moderate, and we'll take questions from the audience after that. I guess now it's my pleasure to hand over the microphone to our moderator, Daria E. Topousis.
Thank you. Well, thanks for all of you for coming out tonight. It's really exciting to see you all here. Big thank you to Kevin and Book Club of California for inviting us to give this panel conversation. Hopefully it's going to be, really engaging, and you're going to learn a lot. And so a few things. We are going to do questions, so I'm going to ask some questions. We're just going to have a little dialogue up here, but interspersed with the questions, I'm going to ask the writers to read a little bit of their work. You might not be familiar with these writers, so they're going to read just short pieces. So we'll just intersperse that with the questions. We'll have, like Kevin said, a Q&A with the audience at the end. And then we'll invite you to come up at the end of the program. You can talk to the authors, of course, but you can also buy their books. So they brought books with them, and I really encourage you to support these local writers. Okay, so the reason I wanted to put this panel together is because when I was a young writer, in my 20s, getting ready to move to Southern California from Minnesota, everybody said, why aren't you moving to New York? Writers live in New York. And I was like, my parents are from New York, I don't want to do that. So I came out here thinking, oh yeah, this is all the screenwriters are out here, there's nobody else. It's just gonna be me and my little, fiction that I'm writing. And then over the years, and especially through an organization that we are all members of called Women Who Submit, what I discovered is that there is a huge literary community in LA. Every weekend, there are open mics, poetry readings, book launches, I mean, you name it, there's just something going on all the time. And there is a rich and diverse community of writers coming out of Southern California. And so I'm just really excited to be able to kind of highlight that tonight with these writers. So let me introduce who you're gonna be hearing from. So tonight I'm gonna kind of go in the order, well, maybe I'll kind of go in the order of where you're sitting. So next to me is Romaine Washington. She is a twice-nominated Pushcart Prize poet and the editor of These Black Bodies Are, a Blacklandia anthology. She is the author of a mini memoir in verse, Purgatory Has An Address, by Bamboo Dart Press, and Sirens in Her Belly, Jamming Craft Publishing. Washington's poetry has been nominated for the Best of the Net, and her work appears in local and national publications, including the Women Who Submit anthologies, Gathering, and Accolades. She has presented her work on Inside SoCal, CBS 2, KCAL 9, NPR, and KPFK. Washington has been an educator for over 20 years and considers all forms of writing and reading to be a source for learning, healing, and growth. Welcome, Romaine. Okay, next down we have Carla Sameth. She was the 2022-2024 Co-Poet Laureate for Altadena, California, and a 2023 Poet Laureate Fellow with the Academy of American Poets. Her books include the memoir, One Day on the Gold Line, the chapbook, What Is Left, and the poetry collection, Secondary Inspections. Carla's writing on blended, unblended, queer, multiracial, and single-parent families appears in a variety of publications and has been selected 3 times as Notable Essays of the Year in Best American Essays, a Pushcart and Best of the Net nominee, a Pasadena Rose poet, a West Hollywood Pride poet, and former Penn teaching artist. Carla teaches creative writing to high school and college students, incarcerated youth, and other diverse communities. Welcome, Carla. Okay, and next down is Désirée Zamorano. She is the author of the groundbreaking historical fiction novel Dispossessed and the highly acclaimed literary novel The Amato Women. An award-winning short story writer, her work is often an exploration of issues of invisibility, injustice, or inequity. Her writing appears in Alta, the Kenyon Review Online, and Acacia's South Central Noir. She lives and thrives in Altadena. Welcome, Désirée. Okay, last but not least, Chicana feminist and former rodeo queen, Tisha Reichle-Aguilera, writes of her desert childhood can be heard as loudly as her urban adulthood. A former high school teacher, she earned an MFA at Antioch and a PhD at USC. Her play, Blind Thrust Fault, was featured in CTG Writers Workshop Festival, and her one-act play, Temporary Arrangement, was featured in the Short Plus Sweet Festival Hollywood. Her short stories have been anthologized and nominated for awards. She is the author of a YA novel, Breaking Pattern, by Blacklandia Books, and a prose chapbook, Stories All Our Own, published by Bottle Cap Press. She is a Maconista and works for literary equity through Women Who Submit. Welcome, Tisha. So just a quick note, we're going to dive into the questions. If you've never heard of Women Who Submit and you wonder why that's been mentioned a few times here, this is an organization that's been around for about 12-ish years and is dedicated to encouraging women to submit their work for publication, because women, historically, if their work is rejected, they stop submitting. Whereas men will submit, their work is rejected, and they continue submitting. So this organization is really geared around encouraging women to just continue submitting their work for publication, especially in tier 1 kind of journals. So really just proud of being part of that organization. Okay, so let's dive into some questions. I kind of talked about the rumors I heard about LA. I kind of wanted to ask all of you, how would you describe LA's literary community today? How is it thriving, changing? Were you surprised by what you found in the literary community? So I'll just kind of throw that out there for anybody who wants to answer.
Desiree's looking at me like she's expecting me to say something. I do that from time to time. Thank you all for being here. And I came to Los Angeles 34 years ago. So I've been here all my adult life. This is my grown home and my chosen home. And I feel like what you said earlier about New York, I don't think I knew that. Like, I think I maybe had heard that, but I didn't. I'm from a very small town. Not quite hell, but you can see it from there, out in the middle of the desert. If you drive from here to Phoenix, you have to drive through it, get gas, go to the bathroom, or get something to eat. And before that, also small towns, my whole life. And so, to me, Los Angeles was like this mecca of all things, right? Like, my town has never had a bookstore. The library is probably about the size of this room, the public library. And I think the only time I ever went in the school library was to take my senior picture. And so that wasn't really, when I came here, I thought LA was the literary scene. And I was invited by a college professor to be a writer. Like literally, Tisha, you should write fiction. I think that's because one of my papers wasn't very good. I showed her, I went on and got a PhD in creative writing though. So Los Angeles has been the place where my writing, my career as a creative writer started and flourished because of the Antioch community. For those of you not familiar, Antioch is a low residency MFA program, which means we only gathered for 10 days in June and 10 in December. But there was something so magical about the people who gathered for those 10 days, who then continued to develop our relationships, and not just with our immediate cohort, people we started with, but with the other cohorts around. And so I feel like for me, it's always been a thriving community. There have always been readings. There have always been people to support and nurture me. And so I feel very fortunate because of that. I will say in the last 10 years, I think there are just so many things, I can't get to them all. There's also a lot more people, would you agree? So it's harder to get places.
Yeah. So it's really interesting, Daria, you said, what are you doing in California? You need to go to New York. I was told the same thing at El Paso, Daria, you should be in New York. It's like, I don't want to go to New York. And not only that, a lot of people do, we're subsidized. That's the way you get into you have a certain amount of money, you get into the editor or the publication route, whatever. So I'm a little bit older than this lady here, and my memories of the writing community are pre-internet. And pre-internet, you kind of like were alone. Or I would read the LA Times and look, okay, what's that event there? I'll try and get to that event. And I found this group, Women Who Submit, about a year or so after my novel came out. It's like, I want to be a part of this dynamic organization. Because what Daria said about submitting, I mean, I think all of our evidence here supports the actually submitting your work, because that's how it gets out there in the world. So, as you could tell, I don't know if you noticed, we're trading books up here. This is what LA's literary community is. Like, we want to read and support each other's books. I was telling Romaine, all my money I make in writing, I buy my friend's books.
Did you want to talk?
Yeah.
Use
No,
that.
use the microphone.
Oh, yeah, use
Your microphone is a good one. That's the bad one.
Oh, let's just use the
you
good
got
one.
the bad one.
Let's use the good one. That's so fuzzy.
That was really good.
Yeah.
Okay, hi. I think in the past, to get a real reflection, you had to dig a little deeper and lift the cover to see the stories that were waiting to be told, because, okay, I'm a little older than her, probably 10 than I. And I came here in 1988, 89 from Seattle, which was a little town back then. Not so much now. And, you know, there seemed to be a lot of people that were kind of writing in their corners and just, you know, not really talking to people, and things changed over the years. Started to see, like, I remember when I was writing over the years, working single mom, kind of delaying when I would get to actually be able to write and finish my memoir. I kept looking for books that reflected my family. And I didn't necessarily find that, and now I feel like it's exploded in the last maybe 10, 20 years, really since I got to know Women Who Submit. But again, I feel like the community of writers, the writers existed. Did the community of writers exist in the same way? Maybe not. But the writers have always existed, just as like when I've taught, you know, I've seen women who have been writing, not able to really like go to workshops or go get their MFAs, but because they're raising children and they're working, but nonetheless they're there. And you know, there's so much more about LA that we're starting to see people write about than the industry and Disneyland. I think that there's still inequality in terms of access and time to write. I think that's a big thing. And I think it's hard. I want to talk about, there seems to be a little bit more opportunity in the industry. I'm not a screenwriter, but I went to a panel on underrepresented writers, God, probably 30 years ago. And there were writers, I remember a Chinese American writer saying, I'm only allowed to write stories about Chinese people. And, you know, there were older writers, there were writers of color, there were LGBTQ writers, and there wasn't a lot of representation. And I don't know about you, but I'm seeing a little bit more out there with streaming. And I think that's enough for me right now.
And I'm kind of an outlier in that I don't live in Los Angeles County proper. I live right on the outskirts of it, not far from Claremont and Rancho Cucamonga. But, you know, we have cars. So coming out here, you know, I would hear about readings. Even before we had the internet, I would hear about things and I would travel out, and then, yeah, I'm old too. And then with the internet, and I shouldn't say that like that, I am seasoned also. And with the internet, it just makes it more accessible to get to places. I love what you said, that there have always been writers, but when it comes to community of writers, that's huge. And I know I've been with Blacklandia, who Katie Porter's in Los Angeles and also in San Bernardino County. And that has been a hub for me. Women Who Submit has been a community for me, and just about workshops, period. I was one of those mothers that couldn't afford, I have a master's degree in education. I was a teacher for over 22 years, but you know, getting my MFA, I don't know, I have a master's in fighting and, you know, fighting against the grain. So, yeah, so Los Angeles scene, I don't have anything to compare it with, but I do know that if you have a heart for something, that if it's not there, you birth it. And so, especially as women who submit, we nurture each other. And so that's been my Los Angeles literary experience.
Great, thank you all for that. I mean, really, I love all your different and varying insights into that. Let's take a quick diversion into reading, and let's have Carla give us just a quick reading.
Okay, I'm gonna read a couple poems from my first full-length poetry collection, Secondary Inspections. The Return. When I first arrived in Los Angeles, I was enamored by so many things. Signs that said Miracle Mile, Koreatown, or Bungalow Heaven. But what turned me from a voyeur to a lover was the bursting of purple fireworks lining the streets every season. No matter what had or hadn't happened, Northridge earthquake, another miscarriage, the day you left me, El Nino and cars floating down lumpy, cracked streets where money wasn't spent on repair, those jacarandas exploded into view, not just one, but all. In South Pasadena, the Mayberry of San Gabriel Valley. In Hacienda Heights, the first spot for those fleeing the East LA barrios. Or in West LA, where long curled tendrils of hair adorn little Jewish Orthodox children. They too stroll past the jacarandas. The day I saw the bougainvillea that twisted in and out of the jacaranda, I vowed I'd never live without bougainvillea. That the next time I moved, there would be bright fuchsia of years covering the landscape in front of wherever I'd sleep. The next year, the purple blossomed, intertwined with red, deep and unavoidable. I felt the gift of spring, this too my home, what was lost, the family, the stepdaughter, the security of the big house with the growing scarlet stunner. This jacaranda on this street hugging this bougainvillea. Divorce never took away the knowledge that I too would return. Now I'm gonna read with the big letters. June 2020, alarm goes off. I clutch my wife, remember to breathe, remember George Floyd, remember Christopher Ballou, 21, assaulted by police up the street in Altadena. Remember the names, the deaths, nonstop. Fear floods in, room congested. A poet wrote me a poem that says, think of your son when you first wake up, and I do, but terror for the risk to his soul, his body, his skin. This mom's heart tumbles, even with my wife opening the curtain, singing me, good morning, even with wild parrots and cascading Pasadena bird song, the cat kneading and purring. Even then, I cannot calm when my wife gets up to leave. I see 3 missed calls last night, probably just my son telling me about the latest protest. He made me laugh at the Highland Park March. Mom, look, that white woman, full Black Panther regalia, knee-high black boots, black coveralls and beret, fists raised, standing in front of that MLK mural on the wall of that hipster coffee shop. Would it be her Instagram post? That woman, she looked at me, just said, your life matters. Yes, it does, son, and I imagine telling him this every day, what I've always told him, his life means. But the words sink into fear, get stuck in the throat, legs still glued to the bed, mind gripped by galloping thoughts. I pull the blanket over my head.
Thank you, Carla, that was beautiful, thank you. I think maybe, Carla, let's kind of start this next question with you, since you just read that piece. I'm sort of interested, how does place, I mean, clearly those were very Southern California places. How does place or history play into your poetry or your memoir, whatever you're writing?
Oh yeah, okay, hey. So particularly with my own family and ethnic racial background, it's very important. The title poem of the secondary inspections sort of stems from people constantly asking me where I am from. And I tell them Seattle, and then they look at me and they say, where are you really from? And so, the real LA, well, actually what I want to talk about is kind of what I write about is really what the landscape looks like, but what it smells like. What is the real LA? And I think that here in LA, in terms of how it that fits into my writing, there's the beauty of LA. The people I know who grew up here come from all different backgrounds, and there's a harshness mixed with beauty, like when you see a crack in the sidewalk and you see a little sprig of beautiful color sticking out. In my work, I'm writing a lot about Los Angeles, about Mexico City, about Seattle, places I've lived, and also a little bit about the East Coast. When I was, my partner was stationed with the Coast Guard for 6 months, and I took the Greyhound at one point, which was quite an experience. I hadn't done it since I was like young. The title poem of my memoir, One Day on the Gold Line, deals with an incident with the LA County Sheriffs. And so it was important in there to talk a little bit about the culture of violence, which you've probably all read about over the years with the LA County Sheriff's Department. And I think overall, I can't write without referencing place and a little bit of what has happened before, who has come before. And, you know, it just, I think the thing about writing too, though, it seems one-dimensional. It's kind of like watching a movie. If it's a really good movie, like especially you see this with some of the producers, for some of the writers and directors from Mexico City, you can smell the city. And that's what I try to do when I write, that you can smell and taste and hear what is going on. Yeah.
So, Daria, you asked about Los Angeles and history. Truly, I also teach at Cal State Long Beach. I teach linguistic and cultural diversity, and what I try to teach is the hidden histories of Los Angeles. And quite honestly, my 19 and 20-year-old students are shocked to find California is not this progressive golden state. And every semester, I have a student who has never heard of Manzanar or the internment camps for Japanese Americans. So Dispossessed is based on actual history. Everything in there is historical fact in Los Angeles, and perhaps you already know this, But in the 1930s, California and the United States shipped a bunch of Mexican Americans and Mexican nationals out of this country. And they estimate, a conservative estimate is 400,000 of them were US citizens. And that is a shocking fact. And what my novel tries to follow is the impact of that on one small boy, one US citizen who remains behind. And as I write this novel, I recreate 1930s Los Angeles, I recreate 1940s Chavez Ravine, because we know something happened there as well. And so I try to bring all of that. I love that you were saying smells and taste. I was working really hard to bring in those smells and tastes.
Yes.
Yeah, let's do Romaine and then we'll go to Tisha last, because Tisha's gonna read it after this. How does place or history play into your work?
I don't know why I'm drawing a blank, because I place into my work, Purgatory Has An Address is the history. Yes, it is. It's my home. It's what made me me. I'm from a closed adoption, and when my adopted mother died, that was the end of the family that I had as far as adopted family, and I started wanting to look for connection. And I realized my connection was in the place where I grew up. It was in the smells, the taste, the sounds, and that's what place is for me. That's what Los Angeles or San Bernardino. I write about a cow, and there's just one poem just because I loved looking at the cow, but the cow was so much, it was like a best friend for me. So place, it is family. And everywhere you move or you live becomes, it's like an uncle or a cousin, and you reflect back on it, the experiences that you had here. The same with Los Angeles. And so I name streets in my little purgatory, and there are incidences that happen in my little purgatory in San Bernardino. That was my family. So that's how important it is for me, and how bonded I am with the streets, the experiences of life.
Beautiful. Tisha, do you want to answer, and then we'll kind of dive into you doing a reading?
I can do that. My writing, I think, as Daria mentioned in the intro, I try to strike a balance between the deserts I grew up in throughout my childhood, in near Hatch, New Mexico, near Poston, Arizona, also a site of one of the internment camps, which I didn't know when I was there. I didn't know until I was a high school teacher. Blythe, California, the Imperial Valley, which is inland from San Diego, right at the US-Mexico border, and balance those childhood homes with Los Angeles. So I have a play and a novel that are both set in Los Angeles, a couple of stories that are in the anthology Made in LA, which is a series of volumes of stories. And then I have this young adult novel that's actually set in Riverside, because I spent a great deal of my childhood there as a member of the 4-H youth organization. I raised animals for the fair, I competed in junior rodeo and horse shows. And when you were saying about, when you both were saying about smells, I remembered, this is a little bit more about my writing process. I had been away from the rodeo for a really long time when I started working on this. So I found online the schedule for the California Junior Rodeo Association, and I went and sat in the bleachers to listen and to smell and to just kind of watch. There's still that baby who's running around with this diaper and no shoes, just like at every rodeo I'd ever been at. And I would hear the moms talking, and there were the group of mothers who had clearly been rodeo queens at one time. We're talking big sprayed up hair, tight jeans. And so it was, even though it was more than 20 years since I had been in rodeo, it was very much, so much the same that it really helped me. My novel takes place in the 1980s, but it could, with the exception of cell phones, could have taken place, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. So I do that, and then my collection of prose. This is a prose chapbook. Chapbook, it just means it's smaller, and it's usually they're poems, but this one is a collection of flash fiction. So several short stories featuring these 5 cousins and the 5 places where they live, but they're together all the time. So it's them all together in these 5 different homes. And the piece that I picked to read for you is actually, I told Daria, I was like, oops, I missed the assignment. And I'm gonna stand up to read just one, because I don't sit very well. In case you haven't noticed, I'm very fidgety over here on the end. I picked the one story to share today that actually takes place in Yuma, Arizona, which is just across the border off Interstate 8 from the Imperial Valley from El Centro. And these 5 homes are actual homes of my family members. So it's fictional, but I tried to root them in the places I knew, in Riverside, in Blythe, in El Centro, and in San Diego, where one of my aunts live, where one of my tias lives in Chula Vista, Imperial Beach area. So this one takes place in Yuma, Arizona. It's called We Are Stealth. We squeeze in the rear-facing seat of the maroon station wagon. The town disappears and the desert takes over. For half an hour, we sing along to Spanish songs, fill in words we don't know with ideas of our own, until we cross the border into Algodones. We wait with windows down while tias buy meds, get glasses, see the dentist. We chant clap. Down by the bank, there's some hanky-panky, 5 ways, until hands sting from too fast, too hard. We get sweet treats from street carts. Mango for Elisa, tamarindo for Delia, Joanna and me both get piña. Maribel decides to be daring and tries coco for the first time. We pass them around and try all the flavors. In Yuma, our bedroom isn't out on by the garage, far away from sleeping grown-ups. We make 5 mounds with blankets and stuffed animals to look like bodies. Outside the window, we'd stacked black milk crates like steps. After dark, we climb out and our steps crunch on dead grass. Down the street at Kofa High, we balance beam along a narrow bench, stomp our size 7 shoes on the mosaic mascot. We race up and down the outdoor corridors, our slapping steps echo in the darkness. At the football field, we climb into metal bleachers and pretend we are part of a cheering crowd. Do the wave! We stand and sit one at a time until our arms and legs are tired. When a plane lands at the airport nearby, swear we see someone wave back. Elisa fakes a haughty accent. Time to play a round of golf. We follow her south on Avenue A, the opposite direction of home. Pick up rocks along the way. Delia changes hers 3 times. Her second reject is Joanna's now. At the first hole, we fan out, 10 paces back and set our rocks down. We kneel to gauge the texture of the turf, study its lumps and grooves. Youngest first this time. The rest of us look at Larissa, know that she'll choke. Wait, what? Why? She sputters and shakes her short mess of curls. I always go last. And you always miss, Larissa? Might as well get it over with. Fine. Larissa usually kicks too hard or too soft or misses her rock completely. She gets in position, lines up the side of her shoe. 1, 2, 3. Her first hole in one. The rest of us cheer. Larissa runs around the circle, high fives, upstretched arms. We walk home the long way down 8th Avenue. We take off our shoes and jump into cool, damp dirt piles at the still under construction Saguaro Estates. We challenge each other to climb higher, jump farther. Elisa runs across the top of a long mound of dirt, and her feet sink slightly with each step. She leaps across to the next mound and yowls a string of foul words so loud a dog responds. She rolls down the opposite side, her cries muffled by mud. And I'll stop right there. If you want to know what happens to Elisa.
Thank you, Tisha. Okay, let's go on to our next question. Why does having diversity in publishing matter? Does anybody want to?
It matters immensely for me in a lot of different ways. When I was in high school, the readers that we had only had like 1 or 2 African American writers in it. And so I was invisible. As a poet, I wrote poetry when I was 14. And so I wanted to read and see me and what we were learning. I wanted to hear our voices, and we weren't there. I had to go. Now, because that there is diversity, it's just not where it should be. And so I had to go to the library, and I would ask and the library didn't carry it, any of the Black novels that I wanted to read, or the short story collections, Ernest Gaines. But when you go to the library, you can ask them, and they'll get it for you. And so I did double education while I was in high school. I assigned myself Black authors to read so I could hear and read the voices that I longed for. And then I got my Eurocentric education. But it matters that inclusivity matters deeply. When I was a teacher, I made sure if it wasn't in the text, I brought it in. I found ways to bring things. I wrote curriculum so that it could be more inclusive. If I had Asian students in my classroom, I would find Asian short stories. If it was predominantly Latin, I would get Latinx, I would get Latinx stories. If I had a student that had disabilities, I would find a short video or stories. It matters so much that we do not make people feel invisible by exclusion, because it feels like it's on purpose, and it's another form of marginalization and racism. So, yeah.
Thank you. I love that you brought that back to your teaching.
Yeah.
So thank you. I think rather than having everybody answer, I wonder, Désirée, can I put you on the spot to maybe answer that as well?
And then go into the reading.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful.
Okay. Goodness, you know, Romaine is so freaking brilliant. She just said so many wonderful things. And what she's talking about, for those of you who are not teachers, is culturally responsive pedagogy. We reach out and we connect with the kids, whatever they bring to the classroom. And Carla was talking about her experience with the Screenwriters Room. I remember listening to the PBS NewsHour more than 30 years ago, asking why aren't there more Mexican or Latin faces and Asian faces? And the head of the studios were saying, Blacks American, whites are American, Asian and Mexicans, they're not American.
Wow. Yeah.
And he was just saying out loud what is there. And people, why is diversity and representation important in literature? Have you heard of this thing called Project 2025? Yes, I went there, okay? You cannot write without being politically embedded.
Yes.
And my book is based on historical facts, and you already know the context, and this is why representation is important. So I'm gonna briefly kind of chop up the beginning, but these are the beginning chapters. Chapter 1, 1939. Manuel shrieked against the waves as he and his big sister went further into the water. Lulu clutched his hand. He braced himself against the next wave and felt the cold water collide against his body. The sand sucked at his toes as the water retreated. They danced on the receding foam. Manuel followed wherever Lulu led. Another wave crashed against them, then pulled him farther into the ocean. Lulu squealed and laughed. Manuel laughed until a wave of water pounded against him. He lost Lulu's hand, fell into the sea, and panicked, airless, until his father hoisted him up, patted his back, and swung him around. You're an airplane, his father said. The beach, the sun, the waves were a blur, and he was flying. His father set him down again, dizzy, unsteady, as a wave headed toward Manuel. This time he looked away from the sun, buried his head in his father's trunks, and clutched his father's leg, which stood steady and firm. It's okay, I'm here, Manolita, I'm here for you, his father said. Lulu, Manuel shouted. She wasn't here anymore. Where did she go? He spotted her red and white polka dot swimsuit digging on the beach. He ran to help her dig a hole. Manuel dug and dug. His sister grew bored and ran to their parents. Wait, he said, Lulu. She kept running and laughing as he chased her. Manolito, his mother laughed. You are a fish. Let me catch you. She held out a towel and wrapped him in it. Two men stood in their home. There was crying. Who was crying? Was that him? Was that Lulu? She hugged him tight, whispered to him, held his hand, tugged him alongside her, and told him they were police officers. Why were there police officers? Where were their parents? The men spoke to each other while Manuel wrapped himself around Lulu. Lulu understood what the men, the police, said, but he did not. Their words sounded harsh and ugly like their faces. He and Lulu slid across the slick back seat of a car, the police officer's car. The same disquieting odor of the car followed them into the house where they were led while a small dog yapped angrily at them. Manuel's ears were assaulted. Like the car, the house smelled wrong, unfamiliar, and unwelcoming. In this house of strangers, they gave him clothes which scratched at him and smelled of someone else. Lulu came over and laughed and bounced on the bed, making the springs sing, and he laughed too. Lulu's large brown eyes brimmed luminous. If she laughed, he laughed. If she cried, he cried. If she was going to be brave, he could be too. Lulu put her arms around him and prayed and told him to repeat what she said. Normally their mother prayed with them at bedtime, but she was not there. Manuel listened to Lulu and repeated what she said that night as best as he could. The two of them moved from house to house together. I want to go home, he told Lulu. When do we go home? When she said, I don't know, he felt as if he was underwater. For a moment he was unable to see or breathe, airless in the darkness. Only when Lulu was with him, her hand in his, her arm around his shoulders, was there any light or warmth in the world. He caught his breath with a sob. Where are we, he asked. Where are Mommy, Papi? She bit her bottom lip and said, I don't know. They met strangers. They slept in strangers' homes, sometimes in the same room as their children. Other kids who looked at them with big eyes. Manuel didn't understand what the kids said, but Lulu answered them. Then a new house. The strangers always seemed to like Lulu because she understood them. Manuel stood behind her. One day, Lulu hugged him tight, crushing him against her. Little tears fell down her face as she said, Pórtate bien, seas un buen niño, seas mi hermanito, valiente y bueno. He promised her he would be good. He promised her he would be brave. She kissed him and hugged him, and then she was gone. His sister's warmth, her sunshine vanished. The ocean water was everywhere now, filling every room and corridor, every crease and seam, his eyes, his body. When he could make out shapes and images, he found himself by a murky swamp, filled with mud and quicksand. His feet dragged through mud. His body waded through deep water. He slept on the bottom of the sea. He awoke to baying wolves and strangers. He called for Lulu. He cried for his parents.
Beautiful. I love hearing you read that, Desiree. I'm in the middle of reading that book now, and so to come back to the beginning and hear your voice in it, oh, I love it. Okay, I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll have Romaine read, and then we'll open it up to the audience. So the last question I'm going to ask is, kind of what risks have you taken with your writing that have paid off? So let's maybe go Carla, Tisha, and then we'll bring it back to Romaine for reading.
So, at some point when I was working on my memoir, I was told, write as if no one will read what you're writing. Edit as if everyone is going to read it. I was always looking for a book that looked like our family, queer, multiracial, Jewish, and single parent, blended, unblended family. And so, you know, you end up writing the book that you wish you had during some difficult times. So I kind of went there. One thing that I always heard also is, like, if you're writing memoir, you have to start with yourself, kind of like stand-up. You have to, like, first make fun of yourself before you go to somebody else. And so I went there and wrote about issues related to, like, sexuality and pregnancy loss, police violence, sexual abuse, aging, and I found, you know, the first time I had an essay published that really revealed a lot, I was kind of terrified. And then after that, I felt really liberated. There's a writing exercise you should all try. I would leave you with if you want to take a risk. And by the way the risk paid off was that people would come to me and say, I really connected with your writing. And surprisingly, they were people of all different ages and races, and you know, it's really interesting. Because I think, well, okay, what does this young man have, how does he relate to what I'm writing about in terms of being, you know, a 30-something mother or person trying to be a mother? Anyway, here's an exercise that Ada Limon, the American Poet Laureate, gave in a workshop once, which is think about something that you're really ashamed of and you've never told anyone, okay? Then write it down, then forgive yourself. Now write a poem. And I wrote that poem. It was called Confessions. It was about being a very flawed mother. And it's in this book. I still don't have the courage to read it when I do readings, but you're welcome to read it in the book.
Well, I will say I'm in awe because I purposely don't write memoir because those are not the kinds of risks I take with my content. I think I take two kinds of risks. I was told early on that people in rural areas don't read, and so why would I write about these country kids, right, and their adventures? And I think this is precisely why I do. I have probably sold more books in my very small hometown and more books in the other small towns that I've lived in than anywhere else. Wow. They come out in droves because what we were talking about earlier, representation. Because if rural people don't read is because there aren't books about them that put them in a flattering light or that tell a story that hasn't already been told by someone from the outside. So I think that was the first risk, is that I focused on telling a story about the people that I grew up with. And I do have to say, because she is in the room, this started as a short story in my MFA program, and I do this every time. And it wouldn't have become a novel without that lady right sitting over there by the camera, because she insisted this has to be a YA novel, this has to be a YA novel. And I ignored her for, about 3 or 4 years before I turned it into a novel. And then the second risk I've taken is more with my writing career. I had the security and stability of a high school teaching job for about 20 years, same high school for 17 of those years, and I left to pursue a PhD in creative writing so I would have more time to write. And then when the opportunity became available to return to full-time teaching, which comes with full-time salary and benefits and retirement, the risk I took was to say, no thank you, I want more time to write. I will continue to live on a very, very tight budget, teaching as an adjunct faculty at 1 or 2 colleges, and so that I have time to continue writing. And I will say that has paid off. I have a short story collection and a novel out on submission. And thanks to this one right here, notes on a novel that I'm revising right now, a 3rd novel, so it's paid off.
I love to mention that diversity comes in geographical diversity, racial, gender. I mean, there's so many forms of diversity, so thank you for that. Romaine, I'm going to hand it to you to do a reading.
Before I do the reading, you asked about a risk that you've taken. Yeah. And the risk that I took in writing wasn't in writing my own voice, but it was the collection that I did, These Black Bodies Are. And because I'd never done an anthology before, the opportunity was presented to me, and I said yes. And it was one of the most fulfilling things that I've ever done, and I look forward to doing more now. So that was my big risk.
It's a great anthology.
Beautiful.
Alrighty, you know, it's funny because I was going to read Decommissioned, but because it's hard for me to pick out things beforehand because I never know what anybody's gonna say and what it's gonna spark in me. So instead of reading Decommissioned, which has to do with Norton Air Force Base closing in San Bernardino, which gravely impacted the area, but for me, Norton Air Force Base, and now I feel like I'm reading it. Darn it. Okay, I'm gonna do 2. This is March 31st, 1994 is when Norton Air Force Base closed. This is what it was for me. Remember the scorched air days with me cocooned in the back seat of Mama's car, staring up at your thin water tower legs, topped by an alien red and white checkered bubble head while she's in the commissary? My high-heeled mom puffing on Virginia Slims, tipping the boy who loads our car, brown paper bags that smell like pencil shavings, me wheezing and mom smoking at midnight as she drives me to your hospital for asthma. I thought you were God exhaling when your white wings cut clouds. Everyone's stiffly creased uniforms and salutes reminds me of my dad. Black Clark Gable looking major with a chest full of pins and medals who died before I could say his name. When you shut down, packed up, and moved away, you were the closest thing to resurrection I ever knew.
Wow.
So that's the impact of place for me. And then I'm gonna do, violence is everywhere. I think somebody said, a few of us have said that before. And my first time experiencing crazy violence was also mixed with crazy affection, and I didn't know the person, but I knew the person as well as I knew Norton and my dad. This is called Brer Boombox. 1. Leroy and them got clean, wild laughs like air full of jokes and afro pics. I never hear they mama tell them be safe, come home, but no she do. They a little older than me, don't really know them, but feel like I do. Like the bus be a 200-year-old boat we riding too long. I lean my head full of tired sun against the window. Bus stop, door belches open. Leroy and them loud talking, thud walking, claim territory in the back of the bus. Boombox blasting, wave your hands in the air. Feel like there's no air in here. But Leroy laughed like cool grass and green trees. Hey driver, why we ain't got no air in here? Black Mac, our regular driver, would have made jokes, like he be part of we, be fam. Leroy would lean back, put headphones on, bop, quiet smile, satisfied. 2. Hank is white shirt, small frame, looking like sweat, don't know his name. Type of man who might chuckle but never heave a full laugh. If he did, you might think he was passing gas. Wasn't one of us in talk, skin, deed, or thought, never had to strategize to get what he want. He rear viewing Leroy without a clue of what to say or do. You need to hold that noise down. You're disturbing the other passengers. Leroy laughs a little too loud and long. Hank's face is beat, but he don't call for backup, does not back up, stands his ground. He parks, white pants, walks stern to the back of the bus. Orders Leroy and them, kill that sound or get off. Leroy and them look like they murder just for fun. Who you think you talking to, little man? I paid like everybody else. Go on up and drive. No one say nothing. I face forward. Quick shuffle. Leroy and them jump off the bus, afro picks bobbing in the air, boombox clutched to chest, bass beating, fear in feet. They fly into invisible. I want to say, Leroy, this ain't what it means to be a man. But that moment be gone. I stare at flies hovering over stabbed beads of blood.
Incredible. I mean, what an honor to sit here at this table with these very talented writers. We could talk all night, but I know you may have questions out there in the audience, so let's open it up to some audience questions. Anybody have a question? Yeah.
I have a question for the teachers, and I think most of you have done some teaching. So any one of you, do you have a story about something that your students taught you or showed you that meant a lot to your writing? I'm an English teacher myself.
I have a poem.
Yeah, let's grab it.
Yeah.
Okay. This one's in Sirens in Her Belly, which I actually, when it came out, when it came out, my fellow teachers said, I want to teach your book. And so I designed curriculum lesson plans for it and gave context for everything so that they would know, they would have all the tools that they needed to teach it. Sirens in Her Belly, there is one poem called One More Notch. It's on page 8, and actually this is the first year that I taught, and I taught in San Bernardino. Boy swaggers past the threshold of her door, pants loosely belted, drooping on hip bones. Before class is over, they will see what he wears under. An incidental shift or bend will reveal the gap in generations. Standard clothes fit around waist snug. He wears loose gear, drooping, begging to be seen like a lover half undressed and always ready. He saunters in, casually sits, half boy, half man, strolling like he understands. Why? She asks him. He says, it just feels right. The Sign of the Times explains no thing but unheard heard mentality. Her patience wanes as gap waxes. She orders him, pull up those pants. He replies, why you even looking? Cause you know you like what you see. I got it going on. And so the line is drawn. Missed respect, disunderstood, a tug of war of belt straps and baggy attitudes. She dreams designer pants that would cover the gap between age and ageless. A common core knowledge is broad enough to make a difference. What you looking at like that, he asks. Your future, she replies. If you listen, I can show you how to write that attitude into a flow the whole world could read. Little seed, pull up those pants. He smirks, gangster, complies, pulls out paper, borrows a pen for the hour, sits low writer style in a schoolboy desk, belt moves one notch, gap closes. For the moment, the lesson begins. That was a really good.
I want to know, Tish, if you've written about that smell in Blythe that still haunts me to this day. And I'm 77, so I'm older than you. But I used to come there and there was this smell like rotten watermelons in the field.
There's a lot of smell of produce that permeates a lot of my stories, and canal water, and absolutely, I think those smells and the sounds that are very different, right? The darkness that is very different on a dirt road, and those sounds and smells, they just hit different than when you're living in a city, right? Urban sounds and smells, they're just not quite the same. So it permeates all my work, I think. I also think I still have childhood trauma from having to shovel manure before school. And sometimes I might have still smelled like that when I, went to school. So.
Any other questions?
It's more of a prompt, I guess, than a question. I think some of you have talked about like what's next, what's coming out, what you're publishing next, but maybe we can recap that, because then we're gonna move into like inviting people up to maybe acquire some of your current items, right? So tell us what you're working on now, or what we can look for in the immediate future from you.
I'm actually going to do something I've never done before. I'm working on a play. So, and it's inspired by my teaching, and so I went on a retreat in April, and that's what sparked that. So I've been working on that.
Was that the jammy, the one that Nakia did? Was that the retreat you went on?
Oh, no, I went to France.
Oh, wow. She said a retreat.
We're gonna talk later.
I only go to France to my retreats.
She's too fancy for me.
Okay, so I have like several,
It's okay.
Oh, there's the other one, yeah.
sorry. I went to, I'm working on, where did I go on my retreat? I'm working on 3 projects, some more advanced than others. One is only in the conceptual phase. That is, I have never worked on a television series before,
Nice.
but together with a television writer, she's very interested in writing about the experience of the partner of a person who transitioned. I'm married to a trans man. She was my wife, he is my husband now. And it's not gonna be us, but it was kind of inspired by that. And I am working on a second poetry collection, very slowly, taking my time. Takes a lot out of you after you publish. This one came out last January. And then I'm very slowly going back to a linked short story collection about a family that was imperfectly intact with 2 moms and 2 adopted children and 1 birth child. And I really was sick of writing my story after my memoir came out, so I have written in the voices of mostly of other people in the story before I got to the moms. So it goes from different points of view, but I write a lot from the point of view of a 15-year-old young man. Okay, that's it. It's enough.
So the big deal for me is that this novel came out in September, so that was huge. And next year, the new publisher is going to re-release my debut novel called The Amada Women. So that was published in 2014. They're republishing it next year.
And it's set in and around here.
Yeah, it's absolutely, it's a total LA novel. And the tagline is, 4 women connected by birth, separated by secrets, dun 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 dun. It's brilliant. It's a mom and her 3 adult daughters. And then the following year, 2026, my short story collection will be released, so it's a lot going on.
Mine are all still very conceptual. I have a short story collection set in Blythe, but also in the Imperial Valley and outside of Patch, New Mexico, called Around Here and Other Stories. That I'm still sending out. My college novel set on a college campus here in the city of Los Angeles is currently under consideration by 2 different university presses, so put out good vibes that one of them will be like, yes, I want to publish it. And I too am working on a new play. I am part of the Ignite cohort over here in, I don't even know which direction I'm pointing right now, Atwater Village Theater with the Ensemble Studio Theater Los Angeles. So a lot, and I'm revising this other novel that Désirée gave me. So a lot of projects coming up. One of the best ways is you can check on my website. Every time short fiction comes out, I have a story that just came out in an anthology called Cowboy Up, and the proceeds for that go to benefit the Justin Cowboy Crisis Fund. So a lot of those kinds of short pieces are coming out.
I know I'm not, I'm just moderating, but I will tell you, just because maybe this audience would be interested, I've been recently writing, my house turned 100 this year, and I've been writing the history of my house, its previous owners, and then what was happening in Altadena, Pasadena, LA, in those 100 years that those people were living in the house. So,
And when you mentioned that, I forgot the other project I'm working on, which is,
bad microphone like that.
what's it called? Bridges That Carried Us Over. I started researching my home when I was working on Purgatory Has An Address, different things. There were no books about the African Americans in San Bernardino when I grew up at all, anywhere. When you go to look for the history of San Bernardino, Black folks aren't mentioned at all. But there was a professor in Redlands who also was working on, or discovering that there were no books about Black people in San Bernardino at all. And we ran into each other, and there was a couple that started an oral history interviewing the different people of San Bernardino that were successful. And we continued that. for the last couple of years, we've been interviewing nonagenarians and finding out about the history of San Bernardino and, from an African American perspective. And we'll be working on an anthology, which Inlandia will be publishing. So that's the other project.
I love that because it kind of brings us back home, right? Like it's the literary community is thriving, you've found community, and now you've met somebody and you have this partnership to expose history that is unseen. So I think that's like a perfect recap and bringing us back to the beginning. So thank you. Please come up and buy the books. And then I'm gonna hand it to Kevin because I think he's gonna close us out.
Yeah, I get the bad microphone again.
Yeah, oh, use the good one, then use the good one.
Let's use the good one. You
Yeah.
sounded great on it though. Maybe it's just my voice.
It's Romaine. My voice is good.
Okay, does this sound bad or does this sound good?
It's so much better.
Okay, I just want to ask you to join me in thanking our moderator and our panelists. This is totally great. I'll be honest, I don't always listen word for word every presentation that we do, but I did. I actually took some notes. So I think we might be doing some more of these kinds of presentations for a book club audience. So, but I'm inviting you to join us next Monday night. It's October 14th online or in San Francisco for our exhibition opening. It's titled Creatures of Commerce, Animal Advertising Ephemera from the Bruce Shire Collection. If you know Bruce Shire and his collection, we have a wonderful exhibition opening on Monday. So you can join us online for that or in person in San Francisco. You can register for any of our events at bccbooks.org/programs. You can email me, I'm Kevin@bccbooks.org. And you can now come up to the front and check out some of these books by our panelists this evening. Thank you, everyone. Hope to see you again.